What's up, fam? It's me, it's Jules. I'm gonna be continuing our devotional series, Through the Fire. If you saw part 1, thank you so much for watching. Just a quick recap. The title of that was, Does God Hurt Us on Purpose? And their consensus was that God can hurt us on purpose, but ultimately it's so we can grow and so we can be molded and shaped into the people or the person He wants us to become. So it's all good, it's all good. And now we're continuing that series with part 2, loosely basing this devotional on the book of Job. So we're going to be diving into another section of this book for part 2, which I am calling Just a Bit of Tough Love. Let's kick it. Job 5:17 says, "Blessed is the one whom God corrects, so do not despise the discipline of the Almighty." It reminds me a lot of this other verse in Hebrews 12:6, which says, "For God loves those He disciplines." At first, I had a hard time coming to terms with that. Discipline, honestly, is interpreted a lot like punishment. And so I'm like, okay, well, if God is disciplining me, then how does that mean that He loves me? But through walking with God, I've seen that when God disciplines me, it's because He cares a lot about what I'm doing and where I'm going. And that's why He has to discipline me. So it now kind of gives me a giddy feeling that when things are like correcting me and I'm always constantly being like, yep, called out on that, it's because God loves me and He wants me to be the best version of who He's called me to be. Point 1 is that God's correction isn't punishment. I was watching this movie last night called Extremely Wicked something vile with Zac Efron and Lily Collins. It was a good movie, great acting. Forewarning though, if you do plan on watching this movie, there is some sexual content there. So just watch with caution if you plan on watching. Anyways, and I was observing how Ted Bundy goes into this prison. I think a lot of times whenever we think prison or jail, we think punishment. You know, part of the judicial system is to impose punishment onto people who have done bad things to other people or who have gone against the law. But politically speaking, we call this correctional facility. You go there so that you can learn and remove old mindsets, old behaviors, old actions, so that when you get sent back out into the world, if you get sent back out into the world, you wouldn't repeat those actions or behaviors. And so I think that when we look at it, it's not so much punishment. If anything, it's a process of taking away old mindsets, old ways, and shaping your mind again and shaping the way that you act and the way that you react to circumstances so that you wouldn't endanger yourself or you wouldn't endanger other people, which leads me to point 2, that God's correction looks a lot like pruning. Now, I use this term because I honestly could not think of a better term. It's a very Christian term to call something pruning, but I remember in my walk with God, when I first met Jesus, I was absolutely balls crazy about Him, was so elated. He was the most awesome thing ever, still is. But during that time, a lot of the people around me were just like, yeah, that's great. You know, you're in your honeymoon stage with the Lord. He's just showing up all the time. He's speaking to you. It feels like He's there, but wait, like the earthquakes will happen. And true enough, in the first 3 months, I think, of my walk with God, I lost my job. My boyfriend broke up with me, and none of my friends wanted to talk to me anymore. And so I felt lonely and it felt hard. And I was like, God, you know, why are you punishing me? I just gave my life to you. But I think He was pruning me. He was pruning me. And now that I look at it in hindsight, He was eliminating a lot of the things that were hindering me from growing in Him, that were hindering me pursuing Him and really pursuing the call that He has on my life, which He's waited so long to really accelerate, you know, because He was changing my mindset of where I placed my value. He was changing my mindset on where my provision comes from. The spiritual realm, it felt like pruning. In the natural realm, it just looked like I was losing everything and that, you know, I was just going through an earthquake. So God's correction is like pruning in a lot of ways. But number 3, God's correction isn't impersonal. I think sometimes we think God is, you know, just there kind of sitting up in His throne in heaven and just going, that's wrong, bam, 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 you know, like game. But it's not, it's very personal. If you, like me, grew up in maybe a bit of a more strict environment, my parents were loving, but I did go through this thing, you're either gonna laugh or you're gonna cringe, called the rod of correction. So anytime that I did something bad or wrong, I would get hit. I would get a spanking, and it would either be in the form of a belt or a kitchen utensil. I would hate it even when I was anticipating it. I would hate it, and afterwards I would hate it even more. And I remember crying in my room and just swallowing in my self-pity and sulking there. And my parents would come in, either my mom or dad, and they would try to hug me. And I found this so awkward because I was like, you're the person who just hit me, now you're trying to hug me. Like, dude, what's up? No, get away. But they would always want to explain to me why they had to do what they did, because ultimately it was for my protection. So number 3 is God's correction is protection. My mom would even get emotional, she would hug me and she'd be like, I just want you to learn so that you don't do that again, so that you don't endanger yourself, so that you don't jeopardize opportunities in your life that can come by. And I think that that's so crucial, because when we look at the very next verse in 18, it says, for he wounds, but he also binds up. He injures, but his hands also heal. So as much as we feel that God corrects us, he's also the one who's coaxing us. And I can almost imagine him being the same way as a father, knocking on my door and sitting on my bed and just, stroking my hair, rubbing my back or whatever, and saying, I had to do this so you could learn, so that you wouldn't do that again, because ultimately it might keep you from something that would have been an amazing breakthrough. It would have kept you from destroying yourself or an opportunity. A lot of the times God's correction is really just his protection. He does it so that we can faithfully walk with him, and so that we can fully live out the purposes that he has for our lives. And it is tough love, but it's the best kind of love. And so if God disciplines me, that means he loves me. If you feel that God is correcting or disciplining you, it's because he loves you. So I hope you guys were encouraged by this devotional. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have, please do subscribe. We're continuing on with part 3 next week. So thank you again so much for watching. God bless, and I will see you next week.